Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Morgan, and thank you so much for coming back. We're starting with 89% battery, so as long as I don't babble too much, we can definitely get this video shot without the camera turning off on me. Today, I wanted to do something a little bit different though. I wanted to talk about some shows that are adaptations that, when watching the show first, it really is what turned me on to looking at the book and reading the books. So, without further ado, let's get into them. So, I have it divided though into two categories. Adaptations that the show was good and it stayed mostly true to the book, and then adaptations where the show was pretty good, but they changed quite a good number of details, significant details, and honorable mentions of other things there at the end, so stay tuned for that. The first on the list is the shows that adapted good and stayed pretty accurately true to their source material. The first of which would be Outlander. I guess we'll start with this one because I just recently finished the book last month, and mostly let's maybe talk about more so the first seasons of the shows. I probably won't, I'll probably branch off, but I feel like the first 1-2 seasons definitely stayed true to the book. Most of the seasons have stayed pretty true. It's just some of the characters had longer lifespans in the show than the book, and other characters that would have come in didn't, because this one character just continued to fill that role for the show. And that's okay, especially if it was a character where they had a good relationship and everything and they had been an important character. I guess we will let that go. One of the biggest differences though is when Claire does return to her own time at the end of the second season, I think, as a way to, immortalize their love and be like, we'll always be together, we'll always be connected. They carved each other's initials into the palm of their hand. And I say this is important because even in the later books, Claire continuously will trace the outline of that letter. Like she traces it when she's away from him, back in her own time, when they are together again. It's just a very important thing to her. And something that's always going to be a big difference probably for most of the shows versus the books is going to be the actors' ages versus the characters' ages, especially if it is a story that spans time, because they're probably, well, one, they want the right actor for the job that can portray the feelings and the character to the best, but also they're probably looking for actors who can, be maybe that median range, where it could feel both the younger character and the older character range without having to do too much changes. Now, let's stop talking about Outlander and move on to our next book before I go too long on this video. The next one was one that I absolutely adored, the book and the adaptation, probably because one of the authors was immensely involved in the production of the show, and also the actors were just phenomenal. How they worked together, played off each other, it was amazing. And this is Good Omens, because the book was just so fun reading. I loved it the whole time I was reading it. It was so great. And this show, I can't say which one was more, I don't know if whimsical is the right word, but kind of, just the fun, the goofiness, that even the bad things weren't serious, I guess. It was just, I loved it. And David Tennant, always going to be the best doctor. Fight me on it, don't care. He's the best doctor. And the way him and Michael Sheen played off each other, awesomeness. Things that were different though, that even Neil Gaiman said, some things had to be changed, of course, for TV, but he tried very hard. Of course, he didn't want to change his material, but some things just had to be cut, or some things didn't make sense. One of the things was Gabriel's character, played by John Hamm, was definitely played up more in the show because they liked how that worked. They liked the personality he brought, and Gaiman even said that, him and Terry Pratchett had the conversation about, playing up the angels more. So he followed through on those wishes and did that. Also, in the scenes with heaven and hell, it was definitely much more visually fleshed out in the show than it was ever described in the book. Still worked in the favor for sure. Another thing was where the Hells Angels, the bikers, were missing from the show, where they would have rode with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which would have been a very interesting scene and probably funny. But it was just not possible, so that part was cut. And an addition, though, was I can't say Michael Sheen's character's name right. Or the Angel and Crowley's backstory. That part of the episode, that very long part, I loved it. I loved getting to see their friendship through the ages. While it was hinted at in the book, it was never fully fleshed out that way. But Gaiman was able to bring it to the screen and make it amazing. Definitely would recommend everyone to check out Good Omens because it'll just work for pretty much everybody. Our next series book thing would be The Witcher. And while I had heard of The Witcher before the show and, briefly looked at it, thought about reading it, I didn't actually pick it up until after seeing season 1. And that is when I got them. And I think that the way season 1 followed through on The Last Wish, how it was a compilation story of a bunch of different, the short story way, and that worked really well for the episodic basis of a show because each episode, of course, can be this different story. I think that worked marvelously together. Sure, they added things like more into Yennefer's backstory with her schooling and all of that, but I think that gave Yennefer more feel there, humanity maybe almost, earlier on in the show than you would get in the books. Another thing, like with Outlander, would be Cersei's age in the show versus the book. In the book, she is a very young girl when Geralt first meets her, and even with the fall of Cintra, she's still only like a preteen, going into those early teenage years when she's adopted by Geralt. So, yeah, he doesn't know what to do with that kind of a person. It's never that he doesn't care about her, but the way you see Geralt in the show is he's caring and overprotective. It's not as much in the books that way. He definitely cares about her and he is protective of her, but he's slightly more held backish, and he tries to bring in Trish and Mother Nanica and eventually Yennefer to kind of be this motherly influence on Ciri because, he doesn't know what to do with a little girl or how to raise her correctly. That relationship dynamic is different. Ciri and Yennefer's relationship is different. The way they met in the books is completely different. Yennefer was brought in to train Ciri because Trish couldn't. Like, she could not manage to train Ciri properly. It was just a difference of what Ciri's powers types are. So, yeah, Yennefer was brought in and she became a mentor and a mother figure, and Yennefer loves Ciri. And I have not read book 3 yet because at the end of book 2, it just kind of upset me what happened with Ciri's character. I felt like it was a betrayal to Ciri that he wrote it like that. And the one that's going to be on the borderline between good show followed through with the adaptation well of the book and good show but strayed completely. And this would of course have to go to Game of Thrones, because at the first 1, 2, 3 seasons even maybe, it still stayed pretty true to its source material, only changing some things because of actors, of course, aging up a lot. But then after it was strong deviations, like whole story arcs changed. The whole end of the show, but you can't fault the creators for how it's different because the last book is still not out. I am starting to believe he's done and just joking us all by like not releasing it, and then when he dies, it's gonna like put out all these novels from his estate and be like, and here is your ending. 4 shows, fully done shows and novelizations that were good. I really thoroughly enjoyed the show, and then I read the book, and then I was like, well, that's different. That's a lot different. The first of which, though, we will go for a softer side, I suppose, if murder is soft, and that would be Big Little Lies. I thought that the way they portrayed the show, especially season 1, was great. Now, since season 2 was no longer really based on a novel, it was based on kind of the conclusion of the book, and they just stretched it out and played out what drama they could there. From season 1, though, the biggest changes were, of course, the location. We were not in Australia in the show. We were in California, which when you're full of American actresses, I suppose that's what you gotta do. Pretty much all of Madeline's storyline from the show was not in the books. No, she never cheated on Ed. That's just why. Why introduce that? Why have her do that to her super sweet, caring husband, who was awesome? Bonnie's backstory, as well as to, what events pushed her to do the showing, was not really explored until season 2, and even then, it was altered. At the end of the show, Celeste is just trying to, still, I guess, process. She doesn't want it publicly known very much what had happened and gone down. At the end of the book, though, she goes back to being a lawyer and is actually a public advocate for domestic abuse. So she is sharing her story all the time, trying to bring awareness. That is, I think, a very huge thing, and I think it degraded Celeste's character in the show a little bit, that they wouldn't have her do that. They weren't helping her heal, kind of. And the final thing that was different that, caused the whole drama in season 2, of course, was that the ladies were all lying to their husbands about what happened that night. They were trying to keep the secret. But on the night of the murder, 2 of the husbands were actually there and saw something. One wanted to, of course, do what they did, which was keep it quiet, not go to the police. Ed wanted to go to the police. He believed, nothing would happen to Bonnie. He's like, it was an accident, or he was, abusing her. And it was killing Ed to, have to lie. But he did it for Madeline and for Bonnie, and, they're kind of mingled family. Protect the children, protect them and everything. But when Bonnie finally did go to the police in the book and the show, and it was like a weight lifted off of a lot of them, the next book would be Altered Carbon, which would be the Netflix series that was high, sci-fi action-y packed. That's not exactly what the book was at all. So this show is probably the most changed from the book, maybe, on this list. Takashi Kovacs was the last envoy in the show, which was this, rebel radical group who was fighting for the freedoms and whatnots. Right, yeah. No, that's not what the envoys were. The envoys were like a special elite military group specifically designed to go across the galaxy and stop any sorts of those rebellions from starting. He did separate from them, and he did have to spend time in frozen jail, and did dethaw, work for Bancroft, and he was not the last one, though. There was still envoys. Another big change would be to one of the favoriter characters. Poe was not Poe in the books. It was Jimi Hendrix, and it was the Hendrix Hotel. But his estate would not let them use it, so they had to go with a free source. That was the Poe. I liked the way Poe was portrayed. Hendrix in the book was good. Raylene was not his sister in the book. Thank God, because that weird incest thing. She was his boss. She's still kind of a horrible person, and still, the bad guy at the end there, but not his sister. His backstory with Raylene, his sister, and versus his dad was different, considering he murdered his father. in the book. His great love, Quillcrest Falconer, he never met her. She lived hundreds of years before him, which, you know, the show tried to, you know, make that connect, be okay in season 2, being like, she was the one that invented the stacks, so she was able to just, you know, keep her consciousness or whatever. Yeah, so pretty much the show of Altered Carbon was completely different from the books, except for the general running theme of season 1. And my last book, where the show was great, but different from the book, and this one I am so happy because I loved the show and I could not finish the book. It is the first book I had DNF'd in maybe forever, and that would be The Magicians. So Sci-Fi did a great job with The Magicians. Like, I will say that the show was better than the book. Things that were different though. Brakebills in the show was more of a postgraduate school versus the book, where it was just a college. They were going there after high school. And also, I mean, that aged up the characters just a little bit. So in the show though, they were in Brakebills pretty much the whole-ish time. But the book, they graduated Brakebills within the first book. And there was still more book after that. But Quentin's character, I just couldn't. In the show, you know, he does maybe get mopey and grating and yeah. Now the book, as everything's through his perspective, is just worse. Quentin's character was not likable in the book. And neither was Janet's character, who the show changed to Margot, and the way she was portrayed in the show was, her personality was like completely different. I loved Margot. I hated Janet. Everybody had more personality in the show because, you know, they were their own people. Their personality could show through their acting, whereas in the book, everything is through Quentin and how he sees their personality, how he sees them acting, and they were all kind of just flat. But eventually I'd had enough of book Quentin and I just couldn't anymore. Maybe it's because, you know, I had waited 3 seasons into The Magicians before finally being like, oh, let me try the book. And at that point, I just couldn't handle the difference. I DNF'd it, and I can't tell you what else might be different because of that. For our honorable mentions, though, of 2 shows that I have really liked, and that would be The Expanse, which, even though I didn't really like the end of the show, I'm gonna say, because there was another book that came out after the show ended, that maybe the creators didn't want to Game of Thrones it, and they wanted to leave it open because they knew more would be coming. I'm going to give them that grace until I do read the series and can know for sure. The other would be The Last Kingdom, which is more historical fiction, and I like it. I like it a lot, so I really want to get the book and, you know, get more details of Uhtred of Bebbanburg. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you have liked my slightly different video and my ramblings, and hopefully it will not be that long. If you are enjoying my bookish ramblings and reviews, unboxings, please consider hitting the subscribe button and letting me know down below, though, any of the ones that you have watched the show and then picked up the book for that might not have been mentioned, because goodness knows there are so many adaptations out there. Or for the ones that I did talk about and you're like, well, why didn't you mention this change? Because this is so much bigger than what you mentioned. Also, let me know. I would love to start up a conversation about these differences, because some of them could be good or some of them could be bad differences. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Bye.